When we talk about Hollywood's golden age, two names almost always stand out, and that is Audrey Hepburn and Marilyn Monroe. And both became icons not only for their acting but for the way they defined femininity, style, and stardom in very different ways. What's fascinating is that while their careers overlapped in the 1950s and the early 60s, they represented two opposite yet equally powerful ideals. Monroe was the magnetic embodiment of sensuality, while Hepburn was the symbol of elegance and grace, and together they became the faces of an era and still remain timeless legends. Marilyn Monroe's story was one of transformation. Born Norma Jane Mortensen in 1926, she grew up in foster homes and worked in factories during World War II. It was during that time that she was discovered by a photographer while launching her modeling career and eventually opened the doors to film. By the late 1940s, she signed with 20th Century Fox and started getting small roles. What made Monroe dominate the screen wasn't just her beauty, though that became the quintessential blonde bombshell, but her ability to balance vulnerability and charm, and films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes in 1953 and How to Marry a Millionaire in 1953 turned her into a global sensation. But it was the 7-year itch in 1955 with the famous subway grate scene that immortalized her as a cultural phenomenon. Hollywood had seen glamorous women before, but Marilyn Monroe had something different. She radiated an approachable, almost innocent sensuality, and audiences didn't just see her as a goddess. They saw her as someone human, fragile, and relatable. That combination made her unstoppable at the box office. By the mid-1950s, she wasn't just a star, she was one of the most photographed women in the world, adored and scrutinized in equal measure.
Musician, maybe. You artist? Huh? Painter? I know. You modella. Model. Huh?
Thank you.
Audrey Hepburn's path to Hollywood could not have been more different. Born in Belgium in 1929, she lived through the hardship of World War II in the Netherlands, suffering from malnutrition and loss during the Nazi occupation. After the war, she studied ballet, which gave her the poise and discipline that later became central to her screen presence. Unlike Monroe, Hepburn wasn't discovered for her curve or glamour. Her breakthrough came when she was cast in Roman Holiday in 1953 alongside Gregory Peck. The film made her an instant star, earning her the Academy Award for Best Actress. With her short hair and slender figure and almost regal charm, she broke the mold of what a Hollywood leading lady was supposed to look like at the time. Throughout the 1950s, Hepburn built a reputation for sophistication. Movies like Sabrina, Funny Face, and Breakfast at Tiffany's cemented her image as the epitome of style. Collaborations with designer Hubert Givenchy elevated her beyond just an actress into a fashion icon and someone whose looks set trends across the globe. Where Monroe commanded attention with allure, Hepburn captivated with subtlety. She became the woman everyone wanted to emulate, graceful, intelligent, and poised, while still retaining an air of vulnerability that made her characters emotionally rich and unforgettable. What's striking is how Monroe and Hepburn came to dominate Hollywood at the same time while representing such opposite ideals. Monroe was often cast as the siren, the comedic seductress whose presence lit up the screen with energy and sexuality, while Audrey Hepburn, on the other hand, was the princess figure, sophisticated, demure, and yet full of depth. They appealed to different fantasies, but both spoke to universal human desires. For men, Monroe embodied desire. For women, she embodied freedom to embrace sensuality. For women, Hepburn embodied elegance and independence, but for men, she embodied an untouchable kind of ideal, and together they expanded Hollywood's imagination of what a female star could be. From a cultural standpoint, the two became more than just actresses. Monroe's image was splashed across magazines, billboards, and advertisements. She became America's sweetheart and sex symbol, with a tragic mystique that deepened her legacy after her untimely death in 1962. Hepburn, meanwhile, became a global ambassador for refinement. Even outside of Hollywood, she worked with UNICEF later in her life, extending her influence far beyond the silver screen.
If I may sum it up in a very short phrase, and this I will say as long as I have breath, for the people of Ethiopia, all they need is the assistance to help themselves, which they are yearning to do. And UNICEF is giving them a spade, let us say, to dig their water wells. Let it not be to dig the graves of their children.
Marilyn Monroe's achievements are often overshadowed by tragic details of her life, but her career tells the story of someone who transformed herself into the most famous women in the world. If you look at film achievements, she starred in some of the biggest hits of the 1950s with Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, How to Marry a Millionaire, The 7-Year Itch, and Some Like It Hot, which won her a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Comedy. While she was often typecast as the dumb blonde, Monroe worked hard to push against those stereotypes. She studied at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg and co-founded her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Production, a bold move for a woman in the 1950s when Hollywood contracts were notoriously controlling. She became more than an actress. She was a global sex symbol, the face of post-war America's fascination with glamour and desire. Her image had a platinum blonde hair, red lips, that magnetic smile, became instantly recognizable across the globe, and her influence continues today. Pop stars like Madonna, Lady Gaga, and Ariana Grande have all borrowed from Monroe's image. Fashion brands reference her style, and her likeness is one of the most reproduced images of the 20th century, and Marilyn Monroe showed that an actress can control her brand and become an empire. Even if Hollywood tried to box her in, she changed the way we think about celebrity itself as both art and commodity. The influence of Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn lies not just in what they achieve individually, but in the way they refined Hollywood's idea of leading women. Monroe taught the industry that sex appeal could be paired with vulnerability and artistry. Hepburn showed that elegance and refinement could be powerful even against the backdrop of a business obsessed with glamour. Together they expanded the spectrum of femininity in film. Women could be sensual, sophisticated, comedic, vulnerable, powerful, and stylish, often at the same time, and their careers prove that female stars could be both box office gold and cultural icons, setting a model that later stars like Elizabeth Taylor, Meryl Streep, and Julia Roberts would follow. And today, more than half a century after the death, both women remain culture giants. In fashion, Monroe's iconic white halter dress and Hepburn's little black dress are still replicated on runways and Hollywood costumes alike. Fashion magazines continue to rank them among the best-dressed women of all time, and in pop culture, their images are printed on posters, coffee mugs, and street art worldwide, and Marilyn's face, painted by Andy Warhol, became a cornerstone of pop art, while Audrey Hepburn's silhouette defines timeless chic. And in film and celebrity, their influence echoes in how modern actresses brand themselves. The balance of sex appeal and self-awareness in stars like Scarlett Johansson and Margot Robbie owes something to Monroe, and the sophistication and humanitarian engagement of stars like Amal Clooney or Emma Watson carries with Hepburn's torch. As feminist figures, both are now reevaluated through a modern lens. Monroe, once dismissed as a tragic sex symbol, is increasingly recognized as a savvy businesswoman who fought to be taken seriously as an actress. Hepburn is remembered not only for her beauty but also for her substance, discipline, and commitment to making the world better.